Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be going through some anticipated fantasy and sci-fi releases for the month of March. If you missed my community tab post, sorry, my dog just came in and grumbled really loud. But anyway, if you missed my community tab post, I am going to be doing these anticipated monthly releases in the beginning of the previous month. A lot earlier in the month is the point. That way, if you hear about something and you think it sounds really interesting, you have time to request it at your library, put in a hold. Maybe you and some of your friends, if you have reader friends, can try to organize some kind of buddy read. Whatever the case may be, I figure it's better than waiting until right before the upcoming month. And then the plus side is if there's anything I forgot to mention from the previous month, because we're so early still into this month now, I can still mention that. And that's the first thing I'm going to bring up, which would be The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. So I, for whatever reason, had this in my head as a release for March. I'm sure at this point you've heard a lot of people mention this one, but it's a murder mystery. The individual who has been killed, it seems to be a very odd death as a tree sprouted out of them, and the two detectives that are called to investigate are a little bit eccentric. And so it says that one particular individual, Anna Delabra, is an investigator whose reputation for brilliance is matched only by her eccentricities, and at her side is her new assistant, Dinius Cole. Din is an engraver magically altered to possess a perfect memory. And part of why they're called in is because Anna apparently refuses to go about her investigations without a blindfold on. So it seems like it's very odd, very strange, but it sounds really unique, and it sounds quite different from what most of us know Robert Jackson Bennett from, which would be Foundry Side. And I'm actually really excited about that. I really love when authors take a chance and they try something different. So I'll be very interested to see how this one plays out. Anyway, apologies again that I didn't mention this one in the previous month's anticipated releases, but it's still not going to be out yet by the time this video goes up, so there's that. Now getting into officially March anticipated releases. The first one does not have a specific release date. I just saw that it said March. The rest of these I'll go in order of projected release date. So this first one I believe is going to be an indie published sci-fi called The Calibrationist. The synopsis says, in an alternate near future Chicago, psychics roam the streets under a regime of oppression lost within the glare of new technology. They all fear the same fate, the Calibrationist, the agent charged with taking them in when outpourings send their powers into overdrive. Wayne Grayson never wanted the job, but with government incentives being the only thing keeping his comatose fiancé alive, he doesn't have a choice. When outpouring victims in Chicago suddenly skyrocket, Wayne must team up with psychic-wary Veronica Jones, a black Chicago police sergeant familiar with the hypocrisies of the system, to discover the cause before the city lies in ruin. The deeper they delve into the investigation, though, the more they begin to suspect that someone is setting off psychics intentionally. So it does go on to give a lot more of the synopsis, but one of my pet peeves is when I feel like the synopsis gives everything away, so that's all I'm going to read about. It does have the comparisons at the bottom of Blake Crouch and Andy Weir, and I've not yet read any Blake Crouch. I tried Andy Weir, and the little bit I tried was not necessarily my kind of sci-fi, but one, maybe that will be exciting for you to hear, and two, sometimes comp titles aren't perfect, so I still definitely am going to be interested and keeping my eye out on this one. Now getting to specific release dates, we have the 5th, and there are going to be 3 things projected that I think sound really interesting. One of them is called 3 Kinds of Lucky, and this one says, luck is its own kind of magic. In this first book in an electrifying new contemporary fantasy series, it says that Petra Grady has known since adolescence that she has no talent for magic, and that's never going to change. But as a sweeper first class, she's parlayed her rare ability to handle dross, the damaging magical waste generated by her more talented kin spell work. Except, Grady's relatively predictable life is about to be upended when the oblivious and oh so out of reach Benedict Strom needs someone with her abilities for a research project studying dross and how to render it harmless. After an unthinkable accident, she and Benedict are forced to go on the run to seek out the one person who might be able to help, an outcast exiled 10 years ago for a crime using dross to cast spells. Switching now to The Prisoner's Throne. So this is one that I'm sure I don't need to say a whole lot about. It's by Holly Black. It is a second book in her continuation after The Folk of the Air. I did enjoy the first one. It is quite biting, and it's very morally ambiguous with your characters, as is the case with the first series. The characters are very up in the air with whether or not they can trust one another. And the perception that I have with the first one is that there is a character that's trustworthy. However, that's where it's always turning into a mind game, because you can never really tell. When you do think somebody is trustworthy, sometimes that's the character that is the biggest trickster. And in the first one, you can't really, of course, say too much, because then it would give everything away. But the way things ended has made me very curious as to our main character's progression of her arc into this sequel. Next up, we have What Monstrous Gods? Centuries ago, the heretic sorcerer Reuven raised a deadly briar around Runakaya's palace, casting the royal family into an enchanted sleep and silencing the kingdom's gods. Born with a miraculous gift, Laya's destiny is to kill Reuven and wake the royals. But when she succeeds, she finds her duty is not yet complete, for now she must marry into the royal family and forge a pact with a god, or die. To make matters even worse, Reuven's spirit is haunting her. As discord grows between the old and new guards, the queen sends Laya and Prince Arin, her betrothed, on a pilgrimage to awaken the gods. But the old gods are more dangerous than Laya ever knew, and Reuven may offer her only hope of survival. And this is one where the cover, when I saw it, I was like, that looks like another Reylo fanfiction, which isn't necessarily what I'm looking for. But unless I'm mistaken, that synopsis doesn't sound anything like Reylo. Now switching to the next week, March 12th, we have 3 for this one. This next one, I'm going to read very little of the synopsis. One, it's by Orbit, and Orbit has a decent variety of tone and types of stories, so I'm really happy with that from this publisher. But I do think that this synopsis is one where just the opening is enough for me. So this is A Feather So Black. It says, set in a world of perilous magic and moonlit forests, this seductive romantic fantasy tells the story of a defiant changeling, her cursed sister, and the dangerous Fae lord she must defeat to save her family. I know. So many of us are very done with hearing Fae in the synopsis of things, but I do specifically like the idea of the main character being a changeling. That's a side of Fae that tends to be a lot darker. Not really sure how the author is going to go about utilizing that concept, but it has the potential to do something really unique with the, what I think is kind of at this point been there, done that Fae types. So we'll see. And also it's from Orbit. Unless I'm mistaken, I think a lot of other Fae stories have not been from this publisher. That tells me that they are picky with what Fae stories they're going to pick up. So fingers crossed that a lot of us end up liking that. Next up, we have Jumpnauts. It says, from the Hugo Award-winning author of Folding Beijing comes a gripping science fiction thriller in which 3 unlikely allies attempt a desperate mission of first contact with a mysterious alien race before more militaristic minds can take matters into their own hands. I really like that brief portion of the synopsis. This is a translated work, and it's translated by Ken Liu, the author of the Dandelion Dynasty. And then the last one for the 12th, we have The Hedgewitch of Foxhall. And this says, in this gorgeous standalone fantasy romance, perfect for fans of Margaret Rogerson, which made me really excited because I do really love Margaret Rogerson's writing, and Alison Saft, a rebellious witch, undertakes a last-ditch quest to restore magic to medieval Wales. Now, the rest are going to all be projected for March 19th, which is my birthday. So hopefully I like some of these, because that would be kind of a fun birthday thing to have happen. So Cascade Failure, another sci-fi, but I guess it's really strongly hitting the found family element, and I know a lot of us love that trope. It says it features a fierce, messy, chaotic space fam, vibrant worlds, and an exploration of the many ways to be and not to be human. There are only 3 real powers in the universe. The corporate power of the trust versus the union's labor's leverage, and between them, the guild tries to keep everyone's hands above the table. And then our found family type ends up responding to a distress call from an abandoned planet where they find a mass grave and a live programmer who knows how it happened. The Trust has plans. This isn't the first dead planet, and it's not going to be the last, unless the crew of the Ambit can stop it. Ambit's run is within this series, Cascade Failure, so it seems like it's going to be part of a series. I think that sounds like a lot of fun, has some mystery elements, and to me, Reminds me a little bit of Murderbot. The next one would be Ironbound Flames. The main character, it says, will play many roles: spy, interrogator, even weapon. But what if she wants to be a hero? Ordinary and lonely kitchen maid Mira Hailship volunteers to feed a dangerous creature imprisoned at the palace. Her impulsive decision could end in disembowelment, but against all odds, she survives, striking an unexpected bargain with the deadly creature and an even more unexpected friendship. Mira's fondness for the feathered, fire-breathing beast called a rake, or a Reich, not really sure, will force her to choose between her king and her conscience. To rid the Reich of his iron muzzle and help his mysterious rider, Mira will have to barter a man's life, manipulate the king, and play with fire. Rake fire, that is. But when doing what's right is also treason, the consequences could be deadly. Blending dragon-loving adventure with emotional depth, this thrilling and introspective fantasy from the author's debut novel, and it's the first of 5 books in the Rake Rider series. I'm not sure if that means we're going to follow these single characters, or I should say the characters that show up in this single story. I don't know if that means we're going to get 5 books involving just them, or maybe it'll be each book you follow different individuals. Maybe they all come together at the end, maybe they don't, maybe you hear about them. I'm not sure, but in general, I miss dragon fantasy, and so I'm just really excited at the idea of there being one, especially one where it seems like it's going to be this kind of very intimate bond between this person that helps the dragon and the dragon itself. I'm excited. Next up, we have the Revenant Games. I'm not usually a fan of any kind of competition in my stories. I think they've been done so many times, and they're usually not as high stakes as what I would expect, but I still always withhold judgment until I've actually checked the book out. It says that it's an action-packed fantasy following a teen determined to win the competition held by warring vampire and witch kingdoms, only to develop complicated feelings for the vampire she's supposed to hand over. What really made me intrigued by this is the idea that you have vampires and witches. Usually you see one group of fantasy types focused on, so you have fae, or you have elves, or you have vampires. The idea of vampires and witches and them being warring, them having to go against each other, that's what really pulled me in about that synopsis. After that, we have Floating Hotel. So this seems to just be kind of a cozy sci-fi story, and I know for a long time we were getting a lot of cozy fantasy. And I know there has been cozy sci-fi out there. I'm just not as familiar with it. But it seems like we're dropping off a little bit on that trend of cozy. And when I did a video going through a lot of the trends that all of you were hopeful that we would see more of throughout this next year, and then ones that we hoped we would see less of, one of the trends that a lot of you pointed out that you would like more of is the cozy. So maybe this is one to check out if you are one of those individuals. It even says in the synopsis, this cozy debut science fiction novel tells a story of misfits, rebels, and found family, and a mystery that spans the stars. So there's this big hotel, and it says it's home of the finest food, the sweetest service, and the very best views the galaxy has to offer. All year round, it moves from planet to planet, system to system, pampering guests across the furthest reaches of the Milky Way. The last word in suborbital luxury, and an absolute magnet for intrigue. Intrigues such as, why are there love poems in the lobby inbox? How many Imperial spies are currently on board? What is the true purpose of the Problem Solvers Conference? And perhaps most pertinently, who is driving the ship? Each guest has a secret, every member of staff a universe unto themselves. At the center of these interweaving lives and interlocking mysteries stands Carl, one-time stowaway, long-time manager, devoted caretaker to the hotel. It's the love of his life and the only place he's ever called home. But as forces beyond Carl's comprehension converge, he has to face one final, when is it time to let go? And then last is a Botanical Daughter. This one I think sounds really cool, really different. It's horror fantasy, and I think it's currently marketed more in the horror genre. But regardless, it says, it's an unusual thing to live in a botanical garden. But Simon and Gregor are an unusual pair of gentlemen. Hidden away in their glass sanctuary from the disapproving tattle of Victorian London, they are free to follow their own interests without interference. For Simon, this means long hours in the dark basement workshop working his taxidermical art. Gregor's business is exotic plants, lucrative but harmless enough, until his latest acquisition, a strange fungus which shows signs of intellect beyond any plant he's seen, inspires him to attempt a masterwork, true intelligent life from plant matter. Driven by the glory he'll earn from the Royal Horticulture Society for such an achievement, Gregor ignores the flaws in his plan, that intelligence cannot be controlled, that plants cannot be reasoned with, and that the only way his plant beast will flourish is if he uses a recently deceased corpse for the substrate. The experiment, or Chloe, as she is named, outstrips even Gregor's expectations, entangling their strange household. But as Gregor's experiment flourishes, he wilts under the cost of keeping it hidden from jealous eyes. That's it though for some March anticipated releases. March was definitely an interesting month where I know a lot of people like to do their most anticipated releases for the entire year, or they do it by quarter. And so many of the books that are coming out, I do not think, it seems like the popular ones are necessarily coming out in March. So many people's anticipated releases, it was a couple at the beginning and then it would go to April or it would go to May. So March is a lot of maybe perhaps hidden gems, I'm hoping. I do want to also mention really quick that the US release for Sunbringer is also in March. There's a release in February if you are getting it from a UK retailer like Waterstones or something like that, or if you live in the UK, that one's released in February, but the US release is in March. So just wanted to throw that out there if you are interested in that sequel. That's it though. Let me know if any of these sound interesting to you. If you've read any of the arcs for any of these, what were your thoughts? I hope you have a great rest of your day though. I'll have all the information in the description bar down below if you'd like to reference back to it, and I'll see you all later. Bye.